Hello everybody and welcome back. This is kind of an impromptu offshoot recording that I'm doing as a review of the Slayer class. It's just dropped in the Korean server 2 days ago. As a disclaimer, my voice is a bit more raspy and lethargic than usual. I came down with a case of laryngitis a few days ago. My voice is still recovering from that, so please pardon how I sound. But yeah, enough of that. The Slayer class just dropped a few days ago. This is the gender unlock of the existing Berserker class. So she is to Berserker what Gunslinger technically is to Deadeye, and what Striker is to War Dancer. So they share a lot in common, but they have a few key differences, including a few skills, their engravings, their awakenings, and what their specialization stat actually does. It's been about 2 days, and I've had the opportunity to grow my Slayer pretty far. We've got full relic set thanks to our Hyper Express, which it accelerates the speed at which you can build a full relic set. Normally you can't build it in 1 week, but with this you can. I've got 3x5+1 on her, as well as good gems and full level 5 tripods. Weapon quality is good, bracelet is good as well. So she's actually quite decked out. The only thing that she's missing are her level 11-12 skills from hitting level 55 and 60, which leaves about 15% damage on the table, as well as higher level set. Level 1 to 2, we're looking at about 10%. Level 2 to 3, it's a bit less. You're looking more towards around like 6% increase in damage. So altogether, without going anywhere on the extremes, we're looking at about up to 30% damage on the table before honing. Between those two, so there's a lot of room for growth for her. So even what you see today is only still a part of what she could be. So we'll just kind of jump right into it. But what makes Slayer different than Berserker? Well, the key thing, or the most important thing, which I have to kind of like cover first and foremost, is she is not red dust jailed. And what does that mean? Berserker has a skill called Red Dust. It is his self buff. It's also his party synergy. Speaking on synergy, they have the same party synergy, 6% additional damage taken when hit. Red Dust is a skill for Berserker that increases their damage by an additional 24% for 6 seconds when they hit an enemy with it. Or rather, the enemy takes 24% more damage, which is very important because, that's a very big damage buff. So he essentially acts within this 6-second window to deal the most amount of damage that he can. Anything outside of that is considerably weaker in comparison. Slayer does not have the skill Red Dust, and so she has the ability to just kind of throw skills out there without having to think about pre-buffing herself like that. There are a few very key skills that are different. She does not have Overdrive, which is the skill that was recently replacing Strike Wave on Berserker. Instead, she has a skill called Brutal Impact. Couple more skills that she has: Guillotine, which is also very powerful; Cruel Piercer, which is one of the secondary skills that are available; Furious Crow, and I call this one Upper Slash. That's not what it's actually called, but it's so simple to just describe it as that. And these are all relatively good skills in their own right. A couple of the other skills operate differently as well, and a few key tripods on certain skills were also replaced, such as Hellblade. She doesn't have the Mayhem type engravings because she doesn't, tripods, because she doesn't have the Mayhem engraving. So engravings, let's kind of talk over that real fast. What are the engravings and what do they do? Executioner engraving, it increases the damage that she deals while inside her burst state, which is what the identity is called. So it gives her a lot of additional damage, and in return she gains a little less gauge, which with each attack she's building into her identity. And also the state is reduced by 50% as well compared to the default. And what this essentially equates out to is a very bursty identity form. No pun intended. But yeah, her identity is very powerful when she uses this engraving, and it's a period in which she can do extreme damage, and then she cools off, builds up the state again relatively quickly, and then she goes burst mode again, and then, you know, rinse, repeat. So it's like Berserker's technique in that regard, except Berserker's technique lasts like a minute, whereas this is going to last somewhere closer to like 15 seconds, enough for one rotation of your skills. Predator is the other build, and this is the one that I'm playing. This one centers around the idea of maintaining your state for as long as possible. So it's actually somewhat similar to the Mayhem engraving from Berserker. If you play Berserker, you know Mayhem, what it does is it allows you to be in your state all the time, 100% of the time, with absolutely zero downtime. Predator does not quite work like that. The way Predator works is when you activate it, first of all, it gives you 40% crit damage. Secondly, whenever you attack the enemy, you regain 10% of your identity with every hit. Whether this is a skill or your basic attack, you'll regain 10% every time. And you're probably wondering, hey, can't you just upkeep the state indefinitely like that? And the answer to that is no, because every 3 seconds you gain a stacking debuff, which increases the rate of drain by an additional 10%. So this is already now double the speed at which it was before. So eventually it drains faster than you can maintain it, because the 10% regain has an internal cooldown of 1 second. Exhaustion, which is the debuff that does not allow you to re-enter your state, lasts for 30 seconds, and every stack of fatigue that you have at the end of your burst will reduce this by 1 second. So if I stop, you're going to see that I've got 10 seconds left on this where I'm exhausted because I had 20 stacks. 30 minus 20, 10 seconds. And then as soon as this depletes, it'll instantly refill and allow me to just quickly re-enter the state again. So this build is all about attacking non-stop so that your fatigue state is as low as possible between each of the bursts. So this is a more constant damage type build because you want to be attacking non-stop. We're actually building swiftness with it. And this is pretty interesting because this is something that the Mayhem engraving from Berserker cannot do, because Mayhem from Berserker does not get the original burst buffs. It actually transforms his burst buff, and so instead of getting 30% crit chance and 20% attack speed, movement speed, when you're playing the Mayhem engraving, you don't get that crit chance, you get increased damage instead. The thing about the Slayer class is, for both engravings, besides for the enhancement that they give, so in the case of Predator 40% crit damage, she actually gets her original buffs on top of that from the burst state. So she does get that 30% crit chance, and she does get that 20% attack speed and movement speed. So in return for having some downtime, you have quite a powerful state where getting 30% crit chance, 40% crit damage, which in a vacuum is 20% increased damage from base 200%. If you have 100% crit chance, and then attack speed and movement speed, which allows us to play things like Raid Captain and use things like increased mass without any penalty. So that's kind of like the key difference between Predator and Mayhem, where one has 100% uptime in the state. The other one is a little bit more powerful, but has downtime. So no matter what build of Slayer you're playing, you're going to have downtime. So what does her specialization stat does? Because all the gender unlocks, they have something different about their specialization stat to some degree or another. For her specialization stat scales her amount of identity gained, the amount of damage she does while she's in her burst state, the amount of damage of her Z skill, her Bloody Rush, or it's called Bloodlust for her, and then lastly, Awakening damage. So there's one big difference between her specialization and Berserker's, and that's the second line. So where she gains additional damage for having specialization, the Berserker class gains additional time in his identity state for having specialization. What this essentially means is no matter how much specialization you build on Slayer, the duration of her identity will always be the same no matter what. It will never change. So she gets a more powerful identity, but in return she does not get to stay in it for very, very long. And so what we have essentially here are more powerful versions of the Berserker engravings, but with more downtime, considerably more downtime in comparison. So she can be seen as kind of a more burstier version or a more damage heavy version of Berserker in both cases. Now, I chose the Predator engraving actually because I play a Berserker's technique, Berserker, and I thought that if I played Executioner, it would be just too similar. So I went with the Predator engraving. I wanted to play a Swiftness class. It's pretty cool that since she gets the actual benefits of Burst, which is that crit chance, she can go pretty heavy into Swiftness. But since she doesn't have the crit chance from, say, Red Dust or one of the secondary crit skills, I decided to actually pick up the Hallucination set. There are many Slayers at this point that are using the Entropy set, but I actually firmly believe that this is an awful idea. And the reason why is this is a class whose damage is split across many skills. While the damage is still concentrated in certain skills like Brutal Impact and Guillotine, she is still using 7 different skills for damage. And yes, that does mean that she's a 7 damage gem class, which is quite expensive. If you're playing Entropy and you're using these semi-heavy commit skills and you're having to reposition every single time, that is time lost where you're not attacking the boss. And as I already went over, in order to gain those fatigue stacks, you have to be attacking the boss practically non-stop. So wasting time having to reposition each time just doesn't seem to work. Entropy classes that work well traditionally are classes like Scrapper and Deathblow Striker and things like Surge Blade, which the damage is kind of loaded into just a few attacks, and so they can kind of like be a bit more meticulous about it. Position, attack, position, attack, position, attack, and there's time with their cooldowns where they don't have to worry too much about damage lost. But because because Slayer has so many different attacks and the cooldowns are so low, you can't afford to waste all this time positioning over and over and over and over. Executioner can kind of get away with it because that build, the damage is more loaded into just a few skills like Bloodlust, Brutal Impact, Guillotine, Hellblade, with the other skills being less important. And so you can kind of reposition a little bit for those, but for the case of Predator, I don't think that you could really waste time doing that. So I went with the Hallucination build, and that's to offset that crit chance so that we can get high crit chance. We're also using Keen Blunt Weapons, so added with the Predator Engravings 40% crit damage, we're running 290% crit damage, which means that we need fairly high crit chance in order to make this build effectively work. And so we are getting currently 20% from Hallucination, later it'll be 28%. We are getting 30% from the burst form and 23% from the actual crit stat, using it as our secondary stat on Necklace. Technically, we can get 10% from back attack as well, but let's just assume it's not there in case we don't have to back attack. And from my bracelet, I was fortunate enough to run mid-circulate, or get mid-circulate, so 33% of the time we also have that additional crit chance. All in all, we're running around 80 to 90% crit chance on our own, which is more than sufficient in order to make this work. I'll probably experiment later on with using something like Nightmare set with a more, I guess, even split. I'm contemplating testing something closer to this with Nightmare, or yeah, something along those lines. To get more raw power, but that would have more downtime, so it'll require more theory crafting. Okay, so as far as her actual performance goes, I have found it to be pretty excellent. Overall, she runs relatively smooth. Same principle. One of the downsides of Predator, though, is you actually don't start in your identity 100%. So if you are doing a raid, you actually do have to pop a stimulant because you need that 100% gauge for it to start going. Initially it'll be at 0. You build into the state, and then it gets the cycle going where it refills itself. But Mayhem, as you know, you don't have to use Stimulate at all. This one you do. So that is one downside of this, which is a little annoying. So because she doesn't have Red Dust, we're using Mountain Crash to apply her synergy. So this is a counter. I'm running 2 counters in her build. The upper slash skill is also a counter, but this one's a little bit less reliable since it has a little bit of build-up compared to Mountain Crash, which is still pretty much instantaneous. Mountain Crash is also closer to her center, whereas if you play Berserker, you know that Mountain Crash is a little bit more forward, which makes it a little bit more generous to use. So we're just going to build our hallucination. And I'll show you a quick demonstration of what her skill cycle might look like. I'll be standing from the back, but honestly, this works from any direction since we're not playing Entropy as a frame of reference. Oops. I was like, been confused there why there are 2 Lumerouses. Okay, let's try that again. Let's empty the gauge. I was like, wow. When is this weird guillotine doing double damage? Sorry about that. We have to wait for this to empty. Refill it. And now we go. That is 1 rotation of skills. That's 2 rotations of skills. So at the moment, you're kind of seeing that we have mana issues because of the really high swiftness of the class. The Predator Engraving does restore 3% mana per hit, also with that 1 second internal cooldown. So this actually helps us with maintaining mana for going heavy swiftness. We're still experiencing some mana issues actually because the character is only level 53 at the moment. Something that many newer players might not know is you actually gain some mana with every single level up. So as you level up, your max mana increases, and mana regen is based off of the maximum amount of mana that you have. So we actually don't have as much mana regen as a level 60 might have. So for a level 60, what we can do is first we can simulate those level 60 skills. And in Korea, we have 420 skill points. You guys are missing skill points currently from the tier 3 tower as well as from one Una's task. So I'm going to go ahead and simulate 118 points. And as many tests normally do, we're going to simulate the Yearning buff that supports usually wear from their set. And in order to simulate the amount of mana that supports usually give us, as well as level 60, we're going to put increased mana level 3 on. And so this should kind of simulate things like food buff, the supporter buff, and having level 60. And you'll see now, when I actually attack, we won't actually run out of mana. Damage a little bit higher this time since Circulate is starting on skill damage this time. You can see not having to use that red dust. It's really beneficial for maintaining uptime. We're nearing around 21 stacks now. This is really unrealistic for a real raid scenario, of course. You're not going to be able to attack non-stop like this. And back in state. So obviously that's really unrealistic. You're not going to be able to attack just endlessly like that. So your fatigue would normally be not as many stacks and you would have more of a downtime. But that's just kind of an example. Her really big skills include Brutal Impact. This is her version of Overdrive or Strike Wave, World Strike Wave. It's a really big skill, has a really long base cooldown normally of 40 seconds, but since we are Swiftness and with a gem, we can bring that down to just 20 seconds, which is great. Her other skill, or pretty big skill, is called Guillotine, and while this might not seem like it does the most amount of damage, the cooldown on it is really low. You can see that it does about the same damage as Hellblade, but the cooldown is just 12 seconds compared to Hellblade's almost 24 seconds. So it's a pretty big difference. Other than that, the other two unique skills that I'm using on this are Furious Crow, which is probably one of my favorite skills to use on her. It looks really cool, it's really fast, it's very satisfying with a bunch of numbers. And Upper Slash, which was her replacement for Chainsword. Interestingly enough, this skill, despite looking really weak, is decently strong, which was a surprise. I don't see many Slayers using this skill, but they definitely should because the damage is good for the cooldown, it's very easy to use, it counts as a counter, and if you try to align it with gems, you can actually bring its cooldown to be very similar to Guillotines, very similar among other skills, so it lines up really well with everything else. Overall, I think her performance is looking really good. I think the Executioner build, you're going to see in the next few weeks, it's going to put out some pretty insane numbers. But the Predator build, I enjoy this build a lot. I've been just kind of having fun with it. I've killed hard Procol on item level with it. Automaton, it's not too hard to get MVP on it, despite missing those skill levels and despite missing that set level, and actually being at a pretty big disadvantage because in Hanamaton, the buff just doesn't work well with this build and set and kind of setup. But still, it works out really well. I think Slayer, in terms of performance, is pretty similar to Berserker. I can't really say if she's really stronger than Berserker or not at this time, but I definitely think that she's on that upper side of damage. If a lot of people consider Gunslinger to be the judge of whether or not something is OP or not, I would probably place her around at the same-ish level of Gunslinger, if not potentially a little bit higher. I can't say I can put her in that like broken level of classes, like Igniter Sorceress and Barrage Artillerist and Arcana and all of those classes, but I think people who want to play a female version of Warrior will be pleasantly surprised by how intuitive and fluid this class is compared to Berserker, which kind of is a bit chunkier with his red dust setups, but at this time Berserker is also considered to be extremely powerful after his rework. So both of them are in a great spot right now. I'll continue growing the character. I also played a little bit of Slayer in Hell Kakul, Saintone, and I found it to work quite well, even with very minimal practice, so I'll keep trying it. So once again, her stat distribution that I'm actually playing is closer to something like this. Her skill distribution is something like this, with runes, something like that. And as far as her engravings go, I am using Predator, her class engraving, Raid Captain, because again, she's getting a lot of movement speed, not only from the Swiftness stat, but from her burst state, which gives her 20%. And then you also have to figure that Yearning will be there, so even when she's not in her burst state, she's at 140% cap. We're using Adrenaline level 1 because Adrenaline 3 is a bit overkill with this, but 1 is still pretty good effective value. Keen Blunt because even though we have that crit damage from Predator, we have just such high crit chance that it's still a very effective engraving. Grudge, as per usual, and Mass Increase. And some people might be wondering, hey, why Mass Increase? Isn't the penalty bad on that? Why not Cursed Doll? And the reason basically boils down to we have so much attack speed from our Swiftness stat, from Yearning, from Food/Feast, and then finally from the Burst state, that even when this is reducing our attack speed by 10%, if you do decide to simulate Yearning, you'll see this is level 3 Yearning with food simulation, so 12% and 3%. You'll see that even with Mass Increase, we're at 136.78% attack speed, and if we enter Burst, we very easily cap out at 140%. So the penalties associated with Mass Increase basically don't exist on Slayer, so you can enjoy that full healing that Cursed Doll normally reduces by 25%. So overall, I rate this class as good. I think she's very fun. Her Chaos Dungeon is extremely broken, but I expect that to get nerfed. So if you see like clips of me running around using the same skill over and over to kill everything, do expect that that probably gets nerfed, because I don't think the devs want a class to be able to just use literally like one skill and only one skill and nothing else in Chaos Dungeon. They nerfed that with Artist not long ago. I totally expect them to do that with Slayer as well. So yeah, we're gonna continue theory crafting, but I'm pretty firm in my findings for the class, my decisions with set choice and everything. I'm pretty happy with, and I'm gonna keep playing her. And a lot of people ask, is this replacing any of your characters in your top 6? And the answer is no, because I don't really have a top 6, so she kind of enters my top 9, being the lowest level character after the Summoner and Machinist, but they all will eventually go to 1600 plus over time anyways. If you have any more questions about Slayer, please feel free to ask me on my Twitch after you've watched this video. Though I guess that kind of defeats the point, because if you didn't watch the video, you would know to only ask after watching the video, but my point pretty much stands. And also her awakenings. Of course, people probably want to see her awakenings. The first awakening is this one, and this one deals damage, also completely refills the identity gauge from 0, even if you have no swiftness, and does increase damage when you're in your identity state as well. Looks pretty cool. Effect is different if you're inside Burst. But for a Predator, that is not the one that we use. The one that we use is this one, which is Ragnabreak, which I think is just way cooler. And this one is just instantaneous damage. Looks great, does a pretty good chunk of damage, comes out pretty quickly as well. But of course, since we're Swiftness, we don't get a whole lot of damage on our awakening, so I digress. But yeah, that's about it. I'll see you guys on the next video or the next review. Later.